Yes, this is the point the show reached its most infamous 5-part epic, the Green Ranger saga. And with it, the person they say either makes Power Rangers or breaks it. Tommy Oliver, played by Jason David Frank.
Our teacher is the oldest living Power Ranger.
Not the oldest. Huh? Just the best.
If you're not aware of the fandom of the show, well, people generally fall into two camps concerning him. They either love the guy, or hate him because he stole away focus that could have been given to others for the 4 years he was on it. And some consider that to have happened to Dino Thunder as well.
Personally, I will admit I was in the camp who worshipped the ground this character walked on as a kid. I did the martial arts, hiya, kick, siya, on the playground. I always wanted just more for Dragon Dagger and Dragon Zord.
Never to this day got any of them, kept missing my chance or found them far too expensive for the materials. Damn you, Bandai of America, for vastly overpricing your crap!
And yeah, to this day I still hold an appreciation of the character. Though I liked most of the seasons after he became team leader, more than season 1 as he, like Barai, was Mr. Hey, I showed up late, sorry, for its length. On top of the season's only story arc, once more because it's the only story arc from the Sentai that was there to adapt, being focused on him.
Hell, where do you think I originally got the desire to rock the long hair? Took me until I was in high school to finally be able to do it.
But if the detractor camp wants something, however, I find Jason David Frank to be a fucking asshole.
Seriously, I can't stand the guy. I followed him on social media for 6 months before I couldn't take the ego stroking anymore. The popularity poll for a special fan collector set he and his fans rigged, and how he ostracized Ricardo Medina for damaging the brand before investigation into said man's criminal charges had even started, pretty much cementing that distaste. And more recent rewatches of the early seasons have soured me to their detrimental overfocus on him. Let other people get more than a one-off episode focused on them, damn it!
And now, for your viewing enjoyment, Jason David Frank getting his ass kicked by Steve Urkel. But I don't think he would have become such a breakout character if it were not for the fact that the show, well, pretty much required his character's glorification if they wanted to use a fair chunk of Zyuranger's footage, as nearly half of that Sentai is in some way tied to Barai and the state he's in. Thus, through adaptation, Tommy became more important to the story than the others. I feel, however, that it was better handled here, as Mighty Morphin also initially used the events with Tommy to progress the stories of other characters. Jason as both a fighter and the team's leader, Billy with advancing his technological genius into more practical and story-useful pursuits that would only grow and culminate in Zeo. Kimberly got in a relationship with him over time that was pretty properly paced out for a pair of teenagers doing that, and it wasn't all roses.
Typical Tommy blockheaded behavior!
Who's a blockhead? You're out of your mind!
You can't take competition?
You're no competition for me!
Am I more than you can handle?
Which makes it more realistically handled than a lot of other television romances, as neither character was defined solely by the relationship involving the other. Oh, and that Dear John letter in Zeo? That can go straight to hell!
There's also the recognition that Zordon and Alpha may not always be there for them with how the plot disables them as well. And even the villains of the show were able to showcase themselves as more competent and menacing with their plans concerning his creation or removal from the board, choosing to bring their A-game, to the point they almost won. Hell, the Green Ranger is shown to not be as strong as Barai. Tommy's introduced as a close match to Jason in ability and power when Barai could literally kick everyone's ass. Here, it's Rita's magic that gives him the upper edge on the others initially. It's a recurring plot point that his powers can and will wane, unlike the others who have their full dose of it, and the context for his absence and then use in battles is that they're strongest together as a team, and Rita will fall as long as we can unite our gifts. As opposed to Barai, who, as I said, was often the preferred Deus Ex Machina for getting an edge over the Brats of the Week after his introduction, when they could have just showed the Zyuranger as competent to begin with.
In all of these ways, Mighty Morphin through adaptation shows itself superior to Zyuranger by fixing the flaws of its source material's narrative when they are taken to be used as part of its own story.
Which thus shows an understanding of those stories and what worked about them in the first place they were trying to recapture and ultimately do right by, in a way that makes it appealing to a broader audience.
This is why I say Season 1 is not a bad season, but the threshold to the bad seasons, as these are all things the bad ones fail to account for. And why is it this element that keeps getting missed in the ones that try to ape the original and pander to Mighty Morphin Nostalgia Rangers?
But yeah, Green with Evil. Tommy is introduced due to a martial arts tournament Jason participates in. His ability to fight the Red off, making him a target of Rita's with which to turn him into her evil Green Ranger. While it's presumed she created the powers, from Zordon's words and what we later learn about the Power Coin's origins, it's likely she stole it during a past conflict before she was sealed, infusing it with her own power so it and its bearer would be under her command, also explaining why she could steal its power later on with the Green Candle. Hell, it's not the only artifact they say is like that. The short she gives him to tighten her control is said to be another artifact stolen from Zordon's forces by her Dark Knight, which was defeated previously, something she has similarly corrupted with her magic. And Zordon wasn't expecting her to succeed in this either. The Command Center's predictions were not designed to repel it, thus being the loophole allowing him to disable Alpha and wreck the Command Center, cutting them all off from Zordon. And without Zordon's wisdom, the Core 5 are left totally blind throughout, so it's up to them and their own abilities to survive until then, which more prominently shows their resourcefulness and determination, especially as Jason is kidnapped and sealed in another alternate dimension where he has to survive all on his own from Goldar, who's trying to kill him, all while he lacks the ability to morph. The goofiness was mostly gone, replaced with an ever-present dread as things kept getting worse, and the music all along the length of it, accenting every scene, every event, every loss, and the coming triumph as they overcome the long odds. And it never sells anyone as foolish or incompetent or lacking in their abilities, which causes their failures and done that way to glorify another, but all of them coming together and doing the best they can to last through and grasp their victory.
Green with Evil really did raise the stakes on all fronts, and it's why it remains one of the most beloved story arcs of the franchise to this day, as while watching it, you really didn't know how they were going to survive. I can't name that many incidents from the later series where one could say the same, even with their own strengths in storytelling, where that level of dread is called upon.
Though it's not without its stumbling point, namely, Scorpina, voiced by the ever-present and ever-talented Wendy Lee. I'd say she is a stumbling point, as the show pretty much forgets she ever existed, aside from one random reappearance in Season 2, out of literal nowhere.
I don't know why she was written out of the show so haphazardly, as her contemporary Bandora Gang source villains were still seen in the background when Zed arrived the following year, and even later when the minion antics focused solely on the buddy duo of Goldar and Rito, as Scorpina was rarely seen nor mentioned even before Season 1 reached the Zoo 2 material. So it's like, why bother when much of the Rita on the Moon footage was already being recycled into a stock sequence of clips?
Eventually things turn around when they manage to fix Alpha in the Command Center, reconnecting with Zordon, and learning Tommy's identity. And unlike Z-Ranger, where its resolution was vastly unsatisfying due to that out-of-place change of heart, there's actual triumph at the Green Ranger's defeat, and Tommy being freed from Rita's brainwashing, and hell, actual recognition that he was under a spell the entire time. And because of that, he's openly welcomed. Not because the team are naive in every reason why he was spiteful towards them before being ignored, but understanding that everything he did wasn't his fault. Granted, the problem with much of the counterpart stock footage limitations is Tommy would end up being sidelined for a long list of silly reasons. Be it practice, classes that he has when the others don't, forgetting his communicator. Over time, it just became ridiculous. But the reality was, this only happened for 14 episodes of the season, about a third of the originally intended run, and less than a quarter of the actual length. First showcased when Power Rangers reenacts point for point the overarching plot of the Stoplight Turtle.
Wait till those teenage mutants see what a full-grown turtle can do!
Ah ha 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 ha. Yeah, Ninja Turtles had gone into steep decline by this point after 6 years and on 150 episodes of slapstick and fourth wall humor, which its creators despised. Some cite Power Rangers as giving it enough competition to actually try and be more like its source material, and by proxy the 2003 series that didn't suck. This pop culture reference, however, becomes, well, meta in hindsight.
I've been certified turtle-fied!
Yeah, have I mentioned I hate that episode?
Shell Shock is also notable for them beginning to start to use more original action scenes to properly integrate the stories they were adapting, permitting them to also focus more on the drama of fighting Rita and her forces than any potential slapstick. Bulk and Skull's antics moving more towards situational comedy and net bullying than forcing it in there, though it wouldn't be until Season 2 that we'd see the actors in suit.
It is, however, the beginning of a general directing irritants and point of mockery. The exaggerated head bobbing.
Power Rangers is not known for its subtlety, and this is definitely one example of such. In most of the genre, the suit actors are talented enough in their own abilities that even with absolutely horrible directors, they can portray a wide range of emotions simply through body language, which syncs excellently with the overdubbing the cast can perform, that even when angry and shouting, it seems appropriate for the attitudes and situations, to the point they don't need such gesticulations to get the point across. But Power Rangers for years lacked this entirely in their original suit action scenes, the suited performers either gesticulating wildly or being so dull and morose it in and of itself became farcical, and an element of the pop culture attached to the characters, despite it being a bad reflection of all this and the genre as a whole. Especially the freaking head bobbing.
We get it! You're talking! Hearing the voices of the characters kind of gives that away!
But it doesn't matter if it's those who don't like the show, such as the Nostalgia Critic, or more cultured aficionados of the genre like Matt Apollozy Burkett. It always comes back up at some point with someone. And yeah, it is a horrible element of the show and straight up bad directing of the original fight footage. But it did get better, taking until Zeo for this to be toned down, and finally seemed to mostly die out after In Space between a combination of Worth Keeter and Koichi Sakamoto's stellar directing, alongside Jonathan Zacker's weird taste for Sentai having him hire Ryu Tsusaki, a Sentai veteran, to come over to direct on occasion during the post-Zordon years. And while the Disney years had many issues after Koichi Sakamoto was kicked upstairs, so him and his stunt team were almost never involved in any of the action scenes, this element of the direction never got this bad again. At least until fucking Samurai and Megaforce, where it had a massive resurgence.
The reason for it, however, is pretty simple. Have you ever put on one of these helmets? Even with properly constructed ones, it's not fun. It's cramped, hard to breathe, and you can barely see or hear what you're doing. Coupled with general inexperience in even doing this kind of work, it's hard to fault them for how bad it could get. But with how difficult staging such was for Saban even back then, and such to this day being a rarity outside of Japan, I'm amazed they didn't just cut their losses and switch to the next Sentai for suited fight footage the following year, and instead delaying such until the Alien Rangers arc in Zeo.
I'm glad they didn't, as Power Rangers has produced a lot of stunning effects work and content that couldn't have been done at all had they solely kept using stock footage. The same set of better shot original sequences in VR Troopers and Beetleborgs, and even reached the point of funding their own suited warrior action show like the Mystic Knights of Tir na Nog. None of that would have happened had they taken the easy route on this and not tried to do original suited action scenes at all. But as is my recurring descriptor for the show, Mighty Morphin did it first, and out of experience did a lot of it worse.
But these scenes are also proof of something else if you bother to compare stock and original footage. These are not the original suits used in Zyuranger. At all.
While most people can guess that of, at the very least, the Green Ranger due to the cloth gold shield as opposed to the hard foam one from the footage, and how the PR original one gave him a never-used blade blaster as opposed to his dragon dagger, the reality is it's actually all of them that are new ones made for the show. They have clamps on their sides to secure them, the cloth is a slightly different color and material, the neckline is completely different, as are the belts, which are just one solid painted detailless piece. The gloves and boots are similarly scaled differently, and they are all sized to fit different actors.
It's odd, however, as a lot of the original footage as time moves on shows they did get the other suits and costumes from the Sentai, or at least reproductions of them, which leaves this as kind of baffling why they'd go so far for that, but skip on the main character suits.
Itsy Bitsy Spider. uses Trini to drag the others into another public outreach project. Now she's trying to save a statue, which leads itself into the recycled plot of Zyuranger 25. Zack being isolated as the sleeping moths stalk him, while the others are off assisting one of their teachers. This episode, in a way, ends up a proto-Zed plot, and how Zed would take something from their everyday lives and replace it or turn it into a monster. Doable here since, well, that's how the Zyuranger plot went. And also with Zack being afraid of spiders and other insects, and how he needs to overcome that. But it's given so little attention due to the necessitated action footage that it doesn't seem to matter.
He shook free!
Oh, and it's also a citation of the first time someone in the cast unnecessarily pointed out something freaking obvious.
We just lost 3 of our Zords! We lost more Zords!
It's amazing it took them 20 episodes before they actually did that, and I'm glad it's done so rarely. Seriously, you should not be doing that at all unless you're intentionally trying to insult and talk down to your audience.
This Spitflower is another on this show's list of worst episodes, with Rita spitefully destroying a float model Kimberly was constructing, and then setting a monster out to keep the others from getting more flowers to try and rebuild it. The context for Rita's plan is pretty small and spiteful, but it's the total demoralization of Kimberly that seems more off. For even as the others encourage to try to help her build a new one, she has no faith nor resolve to see it happen. It was due for consideration that day, but only now was she working on it? Models like that take a lot of time to put together, and she only did it last minute? I could buy this if she had just finished it and redirected after all of that time and effort. But as presented, it makes Kim look worse as she's only just begun and just decided to give up despite, again, just beginning it. And in a way depicts her as irresponsible in how this thing she made a big deal out of is just going to end up going to a waste. Some find it a decent next piece in the developing relationship between Kim and Tommy and how he works to fix it for her, and thus how he is kept out of the action this time, but there are better ones for that. Still, with Frankenstein in your stock footage, it's a no-brainer to do a Halloween episode with him as the bad guy in the episode Life's a Masquerade, which did fall on Halloween, about half a month out of order in the schedule, as it's the first to introduce the Super Putty, mirroring Zyuranger's reported Dokita Clay subplot. If you go by the release order on this, everyone involved seems pretty stupid, as they're all astounded by the whole Super Putty stuff, and thus having it needed be re-explained to them, when it's really just setting it up to lead into when they properly address it, while otherwise having a fun episode where Bulk and Skull start showing the better sides of themselves and helping defend some of the costumed partygoers from old Frankie.
Though now I'm wondering what their reaction would have been to Frankenbeans from Beetleborgs.
It's time for molecular transmutation!
And also, why has Billy reverted back in characterization? By this point, they had severely toned down the technobabble. I blame Cheryl Saban for this.
And like the Sentai, this subplot is followed up on immediately with Gung Ho, giving us Titanus, and the name is not changed as they're on the sides of the weapons, Thunderslingers, which to my memory are never ever seen again and were not ever released as a toy in America. Because reasons. I do find it a bit better of an episode as it does address a bit of Tommy's isolation tendencies, with how while the group are now friends with him, he's not really part of that group. This being expressed in how he really doesn't do teamwork well.
Nor would he ever, really.
When he and Jason endeavor to train together for a partnered martial arts tournament, only for their egos to get in their way. The events of the Sentai subplot changed around to reflect them gaining this as they work to acquire the special gear. Though it doesn't seem as necessary, due to them not having their asses entirely handed to them, like the Zyuranger did against them.
Then again, that's probably the difference between training constantly and spending all your time playing with kids.
That and them switching gear doesn't seem as inappropriate as it did in Zyuranger, as next season began the trend of every ranger form Tommy would get wielding a sword over the dragon dagger. Wheel of misfortune, turn, turn, turn. Show us a school plot from which we should learn. After Bulk accidentally breaks an heirloom of Kimberly's during rehearsal for a play,
antiques like that shouldn't be used for such in the first place.
Rita takes it in another Proto-Z plot to summon the demonic wheels seen in the stock footage, and is thus made an excuse to bring us the first battle of the Ultrazord. Most Final Combination mechs made of multiple, or all the Megazords, are given that title, except for some stupid reason, the Samurai Gigazord. Still, the show ran into a bit of a quandary with the Island of Illusion two-parter, as they weren't following the Great Satan storyline.
For obvious reasons. It's not like a kid's show would ever use demonic entities in it, right?
This part of the earth was inhabited by evil spirits. Demons, if you will.
Oh, so they'll use demons but not say or allude to death.
Well, essentially, since they'd already introduced the Ultrazord, thus not requiring the quest plot of that arc, they needed a new reason why the Zords would fail in battle. And in a way, I feel it's better, summoning the entity Lokar to overwhelm them in order to send them to the titular island, which plays on their weaknesses in order to get rid of them, facilitated from the Island of Despair footage the show skipped over previously in Adaptation. This in turn feels more like a quest and challenge than the one the Zyuranger faced to acquire Ultimate Daizuji's power, even though the island in no way feels evil or malicious outside of Ron Wasserman's music. You really could not have used a color filter for this location? You used one earlier in the episode! Yeah, this and the poorly done acting kills this one for me, as no one really pulls off the emotional states the island goes about inflicting upon them. As after the first time someone saw something that wasn't there, it really should have been ridiculously obvious to the rest of them that would happen to each of them as well. And of course, all it ends up facilitating is a clip show to regain their morale in the face of the place.
Watching Green with Evil back-to-back with this two-parter can feel like tonal whiplash. There, the team is fighting every battle as if their lives and their world are at stake. Here, they're easily on the verge of dying if they feel bad. I thought it was stupid when they pulled that in Zyuranger, and I never particularly cared for this two-parter either.
And it really is not helped by the appearance of Quagmire, which kind of treats the group like idiots, as they're not able to figure out the traps without him telling them exactly what the traps are, and thus rely on him over themselves and their own talents. Pointless role is pointless, even if it gives acting work to an actor as awesome as Kevin Thompson. I'll give it this, the thematic for the clips and the realization for the despair is executed better than that of Zyuranger, simply because they play off of things they've been through, and not an abstract character element the show rarely to never reflects. But it's similarly another sign they had no idea what they were doing with the characters. Trini once again getting the short end of the stick in all this as the least developed of the original cast. Zaraksta reenacts the mnemonic mirror plot mostly point for point, both Jason's cousin as the involved party, once more pulling off the story better in my opinion in setup and execution, with Jason focused on saving his cousin, and how the lessons Jason was teaching the boy helped him elude and outsmart the putty sent after him. Also, the treasure map landmarks are actually geographic landmarks which leads him to the evil mirror, him going after it mostly in a misguided attempt to be a hero and keep it out of evil's hands, but actually resulting in it falling into those hands in the first place. Well, at least there was good intent there, and he didn't continue his quest only because everyone else around him was too stupid to tell him what he was actually searching for. Calamity Kimberly gives us Kim having just the worst day, resulting in a slice of life plot that just feels surreal in this action-oriented genre. Still, as happens when you have a bad day in a Monster of the Week series, you become captured by a monster and held hostage until your teammates can rescue you. A Star is Born mashes up 2 episodes action footage for a seemingly long siege by Rita, while Tommy's tied up with an audition for a martial arts commercial, but is otherwise unremarkable, aside from 3 facts. 1. This is not how auditions go. That was pretty much just recording content straight for later airing. Auditions are more an abrupt showcasing of one's ability. 2. Despite trying to be a siege, it's just a long series of the various stock footage sequences, instead of going from one monster fight to the other both on the small scale and then large. Playing in sequence each episode's stock footage in a way that makes it seem like they left the battle, then re-entered the battle and had to redeploy everything to counteract it. It's pretty much brainless. And 3. In the 2010 remastered version of the show, it was the last episode showcased.
Yeah, I haven't brought up the stupid 2010 remastered series, have I? Thing is, it wasn't really a remastery. They just added a bunch of annoying effects work and unnecessary labels that, entirely detracted from the content as making it seem just as farcical as people mistakenly believed it to actually be, in a way that was intentionally meant to pander and treat the audience as stupid. If they were remastering it, it would have been cleaning up and improving the quality of the production, like what I did with my Black and Black RX videos a few months ago. And as Disney did this right after RPM ended, the tonal disconnect was even more extreme than going from Jetman to Zyuranger. The only reason they didn't do more episodes was Saban bought back the rights to the show and gave us Samurai. There's a debate on which was more insulting to fans.
In The Yoke's on You...
If I mentioned I kind of hate these puntastic titles, they're kind of awful.
Anyways, as Tommy runs an errand before a talent contest, he ends up attacked and lured into a trap. His communicator and Morph are taken from him, while the rest have to deal with the egg-obsessed Fang, ending up with Tommy saving the day after he escapes the trap himself.
I'll give it this. It's one of the first citations of Bulk and Skull's later showcased affinity for music, though it feels as sort of a wasted opportunity, as the next episode is the two-parter The Green Candle, where Tommy loses his powers.
Here's the thing. The Green Candle has always bugged fans of the show, with how Rita just has it now, and can use it to drain away Tommy's powers. Has somehow always had it, and has just not used it since she lost the Green Ranger to Zordon's side. If you had it, then why did you not use it?
My personal theory about this has always been a bit convoluted, and that when she originally stole the coin, she drained its powers, before infusing it with her own. This candle simply being a means of returning that, but took until such settled into its bearer to be able to work right without interfering, as the power is never actually restored after this.
Granted, the show endeavors to mediate it on its own by abducting Tommy to connect him to the candle, it also being said Rita had him touch the formative wax back when he was evil, before actually burning it to drain his power, invoking a form of weird voodoo with the proximity to the power source before it begins burning to get it to work right. Some of which ends up cited when Zed tries the same plan with the other Rangers the following season. But it's presented rubs people the wrong way on that, as it doesn't naturally flow from one point to the other, as opposed to them connecting the power coin directly to the candle before setting it ablaze, which would have made everything so much easier and in hindsight make more sense.
Building off of that, some others believe her delay in using it is because, as she hadn't made it yet, the energy-draining properties were of magic that required time to prepare correctly, and she had other more immediate plans with which to fill time. There are a lot of ways people try to justify this point, when the reality is it just was not told very well.
But with the immediately preceding episode featuring Tommy's Morpher being stolen briefly, it's a bit irritating they didn't try to set up this plan then. Still, it's not a bad two-parter at all, as, once again, everyone comes off as competent. There's legitimate drama amidst the crisis.
If we don't get to him in time, he'll lose his life.
See? They even broke Saban's stupid rule about not mentioning death.
Unfortunately, they fail, but can keep the powers from Rita by passing them to another Ranger. Tommy depowered, and Jason gaining the Dragon Shield and Dagger. This sequence was originally going to be a recreation of Zyuranger's passing of Barai, only lacking the death, the transfer of power to Jason saving Tommy's life. But this was nixed by the higher-ups while still in the scripting stage of things.
It's debatable on which would have been better. There would have been something more noble to the passing than the basic ceremony on the set, but likewise it would have been aping Barai. The scene works as presented here, it just doesn't feel that strong.
Though it ends on a high of, after struggling to do this for a while, Tommy asks Kim out. Yay. Bird of a Feather following this is once more not a good episode, as it shows the Rangers as kinda stupid when they face their counterparts Hedora and Teus, Hatchosaurus, and from the beginning know about the heart that allows it to revive after destruction, only for them to not deal with it when they first fight it, resulting in Zordon having to call them all back in just to send them out to immediately fight it again. Which could have been remedied with them fighting it immediately at the beginning, going about their side plot for a bit as it revives, then surprised at the revival and Zordon telling them of the heart to lead into the next fight. It would have more matched the Sentai's plot structure, yeah, but it was foolish to diverge from it if it'd make their group look worse as a consequence. But in contrast, the environmentalism message of the amazingly basic Cleanup Club isn't as insulting to its audience as its Sentai counterpart is, with how Trini ropes the group into once again more volunteer work to clean up the garbage left in one of the Angel Grove's park districts, though I'm baffled there's no park commission meant to deal with that. It's more serviceable mainly due to the lack of an asshole kid, and Saban would not make a trend out of environmentalism episodes that would get worse and worse with every passing year. It's relevant, however, as a sign of the little progress the show makes. Billy, for the first time in this episode, being able to fight off the putties, instead of relying solely on quick thinking and working in tandem with the others to face them unmorphed, which would only improve the following year. The originally intended penultimate episode, A Bad Reflection on You, of course brings us a recreation of the doppelganger plot, but this time I feel has a better point to it. Instead of showing the populace as imbeciles, Rita uses the fakes to frame the Rangers for a list of misdeeds that gets them thrown into detention, thus unable to answer to calls for help, or fight off the copies when they then wreck Devastation. It's still something of a short-sighted plan, as they won't be stuck in detention permanently, but even a few hours unimpeded can wreck a huge swath of Devastation when it all involves superpowers.
Plus, Rita's a bit more spiteful than Bandora in doing the personal attacks on them, so fits.
Which brings us to Doomsday, the originally intended two-part series finale. Rita calls upon Lokar again in order to bring forth the mechanical Dark Zord Cyclopsis, this being the first citation of also calling an enemy-piloted machine a Zord, as the Power Rangers prepare for an event the city is holding in their honor, to thank them for what they've done in saving it from Rita. Only for everyone in the event and in the city to be abducted as Cyclopsis and Lokar come for them, the first battle draining them enough that redeploying leaves them severely weakened. Unfortunately, instead of putting them in dire straits like it did in Z-Ranger, it's written so the mechs just withdraw, robbing much of the potential drama, as it's just a waiting game until they can recover. And unfortunately, the show's resolution does become Deus Ex Machina-y, in how Zordon and Alpha use Rita's palace being on Earth during this to tap into her databases to discover Cyclops' weakness and how to depower her, when Rita does not use technology, thus they can't do that. It would have made more sense, since they write Cyclops' weakness to being unable to adapt to multiple attack means if hit in rapid succession, for the Rangers to consider doing this after seeing something in a prior battle, than having this intended final victory to be just handed to them. There's a rumor this was rewritten and changed last minute, but for an intended finale, it's arguably one of the weakest the show has ever done, even with the recognition given to them in its resolution, which was meant to wrap things up.
But to everyone's amazement, when the series originally aired its first 40 episodes over the course of 3 months, the show became insanely popular. It blew up the ratings charts for children's programming, and merchandise sales were insane. So, instead of just thinking of trying to bottle lightning and adapt another Sentai directly, they decided to tack on more content. This would prove to not be the best of ideas.